How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and today we're going to focus on the amount of dry air and dust we should experience this hurricane season. And the reason why this is important is because, of course, when there's a high amount of dry air or dust in the atmosphere or in the main development region of the Atlantic, that inhibits tropical cyclone development. So it's very important to determine how much dry air there is in the northern Atlantic to really determine how many storms will form this hurricane season. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So to begin, let's take a look at the Saharan air layer forecast or the Saharan dust layer forecast. So this is how it's looking right now, and of course you see that pretty much a lot of the southern portion of the main development region is swallowed up by this large area of Saharan dust. And of course it's only March, so the Saharan dust isn't necessarily swallowing up the main development region just yet. The dust should move a little bit more northward as we head closer and closer to the hurricane season. That's typically when the most Saharan dust inhibits tropical cyclone development in the main developed region, which is part of the reason why typically during the early season of the hurricane season you don't experience many tropical cyclones that develop in the main developed region. It's not until August and September, of course, when we begin to see more tropical activity in the main development region. But you see that right now we're seeing a large area of dust, and I do expect this to move northward, but we need to take a look at several other factors to really determine how much Saharan dust and dry air there will be this hurricane season. So take a look at the Saharan dust layer right now. Like I showed you, it's pretty much in the southern portion of the main development region. However, if we were to take a look at the future, you see the Saharan dust will eventually move northward, but it shouldn't really be much of a worry, or at least any sort of concern as of right now, because of course it's not even hurricane season yet. No tropical cyclones develop. I just want to show you guys how the Saharan dust layer will affect the tropical hurricane season by showing you how large this area of dust is. And the thing is that with the reason why Saharan dust inhibits tropical cyclone development in the first place is because it creates a temperature inversion in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And what that pretty much means is that when there's a high amount of Saharan dust in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, the Saharan dust layer is a lot warmer than the area of air that's in the lower levels of the atmosphere. And what that does is that since it's very warm in the lower levels of the atmosphere, of course we're bound to experience very buoyant air molecules that want to rise up in the atmosphere. But since the Saharan dust layer is a lot warmer than the air molecules in the lower levels of the atmosphere, then it inhibits convection, because of course because cooler air sinks and the air in the lower levels is cooler than the Saharan dust layer. So as a result, the water vapor and the air molecules aren't very buoyant and don't really rise as high to allow for a lot of convection to occur, which is the reason why we typically don't see a lot of convection or tropical cyclones when Saharan dust is pretty much swallowing the main development region. So let me first show you guys the monthly precipitation outlook, because this really determines how much moist air, and it could determine how much Saharan dust the CFS model is forecasting before the beginning of the hurricane season. And if I were to move forward, you see that during the month of June, you see that a lot of the main development region it's expected to be drier than average. So this could mean that there might be a little bit more Saharan dust than average, and this extends to portions of the Caribbean as well. Of course, we do see some areas where it's a little bit more moist than average, but for the most part, most of the Atlantic is a little bit drier than average for the month of June. So this might be a sign that maybe during the month of June we do see a little bit less of a less active than usual hurricane season. But of course June is still a relatively weak month, so even if June doesn't necessarily is below average when it comes to tropical cyclone activity, that won't mean much when talking about how the overall hurricane season will turn out, because of course August and September are the far more active months, and those are the months that really determine how many storms you'll experience in the hurricane season. And taking a look at the month of July, you see that we begin to see a little bit more of a moist environment in the main developed region, which is a little bit concerning because we don't want to see a very moist environment in the main developed region during the more active months of the hurricane season. But it seems like the CFS model is expecting this, so we should, based on this, we should expect the Saharan dust to maybe leave the main developed region relatively early, and we should expect a more moist environment throughout the main developed region for more tropical cyclones to develop. Moving into August, you see that while a lot of the southern Caribbean and maybe the southern Gulf of Mexico is drier than average, you see that for the most part, the main developed region is more moist than average. Of course, if you go a little bit further southward, it's much drier than average, but it doesn't really matter going that far southward because it's very rare for any sort of tropical cyclone to develop, let alone move through this area this far south, because of course the Coriolis effect is very weak when you go this far south. So even if a low pressure system was taking the path to go southward and has at least every right condition to develop into maybe a tropical cyclone, it would be very difficult for it to, because the Coriolis effect just isn't strong enough this close to the equator. So for the most part, the main developed region is much more moist than average, and I believe that this should allow for more tropical cyclones than average overall if this forecast continues, that we do see a more moist than average main development region for the month of August. Now, taking a look for September, you see the more moist than average conditions continue. This extends just north of the Caribbean islands, extending to Florida as well. And so based on this, we should expect a more active than usual hurricane season because it's expected to be more moist than average. There's going to be a little bit more lift, and as a result, less dry air to inhibit tropical cyclone development. So based on this, I definitely forecast a more active than usual hurricane season, and I'd say it's not until October where maybe it does become a little bit more dry, but the damage will be already done because September and August, you see that the forecast currently is a more moist than average hurricane season. But again, there's still uncertainty. Take this with a grain of salt because of course making forecasts in the long-term future, 5-6 months out, is definitely subject to change, and it's definitely a little bit more difficult to forecast. So this could definitely change, hopefully for the better, but we just need to wait and see. And as of right now, it's better to forecast a more moist than average main development region than a drier than average main development region, which is definitely concerning because that could encourage more tropical cyclone development in that region. And another thing I want to show you guys is the forecasted sea surface temperatures, because of course, like I've been saying in my previous hurricane season videos, the temperature anomalies are expected for the most part to be warmer than average for the main developed region. There could be a little area where it's cooler than average just off the West African coast, but for the most part, majority of the main developed region is experiencing warmer than average sea surface temperatures, which should allow for more of a lifting motion in this area for more tropical cyclones to develop, which is another concern, definitely. So that's something to keep in mind, that it's expected to be more moist than average for the main developed region, and a lot of the Caribbean as well, at least just north of the Caribbean islands, where the sea surface temperature should be much warmer than average for more tropical cyclones to develop in a more moist and humid environment. Now, taking a look at the current sea surface temperature anomalies, you see that we're actually experiencing sea surface temperatures cooler than average just off the African coast. So you guys are experiencing, so it's during a scenario like that, you're more likely to experience a more sinking motion in the atmosphere, which would inhibit tropical cyclone development, obviously. But I do expect sea surface temperatures to rise eventually once we head closer and closer into the hurricane season. So just because it's cooler than average now does not mean it'll stay that way for the rest of the hurricane season, because of course there's still plenty of months for this to change and sea surface temperatures to change to allow for a more rising motion in the atmosphere. And even if the sea surface temperatures doesn't rise as much as anticipated, look at the Western Atlantic. You see that the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, a lot of the Western Atlantic, even extending further northward, are experiencing temperatures sea surface temperatures well above average. So even if we do see less than average tropical cyclones in this area, we're more likely to see a higher than average tropical cyclone development in this area. But I do expect sea surface temperatures to rise in the main development region. So overall for the Atlantic, I do expect a more active than usual hurricane season as a result of a more humid environment and warmer than average sea surface temperatures that will encourage a more humid environment. And if we were to take a look at the drought monitor as well for the eastern half of the United States, which is another big factor, because of course when an area is drier than average, it's simply very difficult to change the conditions or the climate into a more moist than average environment, as it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while for that to happen. But a lot of the East Coast isn't experiencing any sort of drought. It's a different story along the West Coast, but of course we don't see tropical cyclones impact the West Coast, at least in the United States. So taking a look at when we take a look at the East Coast area most prominent that gets hit by tropical cyclones, it's going to be, there's not really any sort of drought to maybe increase the amount of dry air in the atmosphere. So as a result, I do expect a more active than usual hurricane season. And as in terms of Saharan dust and dry air, you should expect for this hurricane season, I do expect it to be a little bit less than average as a result of a rising motion in the atmosphere induced by the warmer than average sea surface temperatures and a monsoon that's expected to occur just off the African coast. So make sure to keep that in mind throughout the United States and the Atlantic overall. So here's my forecast. So I expect during the beginning of the hurricane season, we should see an abundance of Saharan dust, but I do think it'll go away by the July timeframe. So make sure to keep that in mind throughout the Atlantic and those that could get impacted by tropical cyclones this hurricane season. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.